Good morning and thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my voice. My name is Maria Franco and I am a junior at the American School of Milan. I am originally Colombian, but have since lived in 6 cities in 5 different countries. Having lived in Milan for the last 6 years, I've learned that Italians are very proud of their specialty, olive oil. I learned that Italian olive oil is the best and richest, and I often hear that they say because of the fresh products, and no other oil from America to India can compare. In fact, something that I love about living here is that it's not only oil, but also meat, flour, and other staples that we in Italy say are the best. But that's because most food here is produced with fresh ingredients and isn't contaminated with knockoffs. Collaboration between modern technology and traditional practices have secured Italy's place as a food leader. And that's what I'm introducing, synergy and solutions for the next food system. When talking about the future of our food system, ideas like sustainability tend to take center stage. But what we need to do as a community is start by simply changing our diet for the better. We need to have a healthier diet composed of fresher products, and the market needs to provide them. For a healthier diet, we cannot have meat that is mostly cow, but also some unknown animal. And we can't have fruits and vegetables that are contaminated with pollutants that aren't only bad for us, but also lead to biomagnification that harms many more animals worldwide. Thankfully, many corporations, multinationals, and government agencies have realized the magnitude of the problem surrounding quality and sustainability in agriculture. Many government policies have been enacted, and foundations such as the Rockefeller Foundation or the FoodTech are fighting for the sustainability of food for not only my generation, but also for the next one. Today, I am here to introduce a group of 9 experts that will discuss the issue of synergy and solutions for our food system, as well as talk about collaboration in the food tech sector and where this can take the future of our food. Thank you for your time and for inspiring us all.
Hello, good morning, buongiorno, tutti quanti, everybody. During Obama's presidency, he was in charge of USAID. He made a recognized work by reshaping the operations of this agency and making it possible to deliver greater help and assistance to countries and to people. Following his passion to create opportunities in developing world, he also founded Latitude Capital. He also has great experience in philanthropy. First, at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, now as president of the Rockefeller Foundation. It's my pleasure, and I beg you to join me welcoming Dr. Najib Shah. Please, Doctor. Thank you. Welcome to Seeds&Chips.
Thank you, Beatrice, for that kind
Bye.
introduction, and good morning. I'm glad to be with you today and to share with you some thoughts on the Rockefeller Foundation's focus on the future of the world's food systems. I wanted to start just by sharing a story from my childhood. When I was young, I grew up around Detroit, Michigan, in the United States, and I was an avid consumer of these snacks. They were called Snackwells, and in fact, they were very popular as a healthy snack alternative for children in the 1980s when I was a teenager. And they became exceptionally popular in the consumer market. In fact, they sold at around $500 million a year at the time, which today would be nearly $1 billion a year. And we thought they were helpful because they were labeled as fat-free. And in fact, we know later, after many, many years, that these types of high-sugar processed snacks are actually not good for children, and yet we thought they were, and we produced them and consumed them. And that's at the end of the day because we have a food system that focuses on profit and productivity. That's a good thing for solving many of the challenges we face. In fact, if you look at this slide, you see that cereal productions from the 1960s to today have increased nearly 280% far outstripping both population growth and total global land use for food production. And that's necessary in order to sustain food for an ever-growing planet and population. The Rockefeller Foundations played a significant role in helping to shape this food system around the world. In the 1950s, we started investing in large-scale agricultural research in developing countries like Mexico, India, and elsewhere. And in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we were part of a global movement that created the Green Revolution, increasing crop yields in low-income countries, and doing that in a manner that helped move nearly 1 billion people off the brink of starvation and into a place where they were less poor and had adequate access to food and for survival. And we see the fruits of that labor every day. In 1970, 35% of people in developing countries were undernourished, meaning they didn't get even 2,000 calories per day. Today, that's under 13% of the global population. In fact, the Rockefeller Foundation, together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a number of other partners, have continued to invest in a green revolution in Africa in particular, where we still need to increase productivity of agriculture in order to make food more accessible, lower cost, and to address what is still a challenge with respect to widespread hunger and malnutrition. But we know, despite those gains, that our food system around the world is not succeeding. In fact, our food system is both making us sick and destroying our global environment. Food and agriculture accounts for 70% of fresh water use, 50% of total land use, and 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's more than every car, every truck, every train, and every airplane put together. In fact, the entire global transportation sector is about 14% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So we know we need to rethink our food system to create more sustainability. We also know that we have to rethink our global food system to create better opportunities for human health. And this is extraordinarily important. Worldwide, 400 million people have diabetes. Diabetes and other chronic diseases that at their core are caused by dietary factors are increasingly the challenge to the future of human health and global healthcare systems. In fact, in the United States alone, 30 million Americans have diabetes. And we spend nearly $245 billion a year treating that chronic condition, which still causes 1.5 million deaths per year. It's not just diabetes, though. We actually know that dietary risk factors is the #1 cause for global premature mortality or death. In fact, we cause more death because of our food system and because of what we eat in the United States and, frankly, all around the world than child and maternal malnutrition, drug and alcohol use, and air pollution all combined. New data is demonstrating that these deaths are attributable to specific risk factors in our diet. And this is extraordinarily important for us to understand and to innovate to resolve. In fact, what we find is the solution to this dietary risk is not, in fact, eating less bad things. Like when I was young and we were consuming SnackWells, we were doing that so we had less fat, and we thought that was healthy. In fact, we now know that while the reduction in processed foods is a critical part of attaining a more healthy food system, that's what high in sodium means, which is the #1 element of that. We know that the next 8 risk factors are actually related to the underconsumption of protective foods: whole grains, fruits, seeds, vegetables, foods high in omega-3 fatty acids, fiber, polyunsaturated fats, and legumes. That taken together represent a whole class of protective foods that consumed at adequate amounts over the lifetime of an individual will actually prevent specific diseases that lead to mortality and morbidity and are increasingly the global challenge in health and human welfare. Now, we've known that these protective foods are exceptionally important and quite beneficial to health and well-being for a very long time. In fact, this is a screenshot of something called the Rockefeller Foundation Illustrated Magazine back in 1977 that described the difference between protective foods, bodybuilding foods, I particularly like that phrase, and high energy foods. Now, for those of you that have children, I have 3. We all know that we market to our kids these types of foods. We call them grow food in our family in order to convince them to consume them. But we've known this for a very long time. What we haven't necessarily known is what are the scientific pathways that help an appropriate amount of these types of foods yield a result that prevents the kinds of chronic illnesses that are debilitating for our more industrial economy and global populations. And here, the advances in the science of understanding how food and nutrition, the 28,000 various compounds that make up our food in our diets, and their impact on our ability to regulate how we consume food and how it's processed inside of our bodies, converted to energy, and used by our health systems is particularly new and particularly important to understand as we go forward. New data out of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, based at the University of Washington, shows what we're talking about. It demonstrates that worldwide, the consumption of these protective foods is critically low relative to recommended amounts. The circle here represents what a complete diet would look like in terms of consumption of these protective foods. And you can see on a global basis, our global consumption of these protective foods is way, way, way below where it needs to be. And this phenomenon is not just something that applies in the United States or here in Italy or in other industrial economies. In fact, if you look at high-income North American populations, you see that this reality is in fact true and accurate, but it's also true in Asia, true in Western Europe, and true in Africa. In fact, in Western Africa, specifically, legume consumption achieves and even exceeds the recommended amount, but everything else is extraordinarily low. And we see that the fastest increases in chronic disease around the world are happening in those emerging economies and their rapidly growing and rapidly aging populations. So at the Rockefeller Foundation, we seek to build a food system that nourishes all people, protects and regenerates the environment, and enables the flourishing of culture and community. We continue to invest in an African green revolution. And this is a screenshot from one of our partners named Atlas AI that is using artificial intelligence to take in satellite photography, process it through AI algorithms, and generate these types of heat maps. The red on these maps represent highly productive farms in western Kenya, and the yellow and blue-green represent areas of low productivity and farms of low productivity. The fact that we have this kind of data allows our partner, the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa, to target those communities, those farms, and those households that still have significant yield potential and try to reach them with improved hybrids, fertilizers, and other solutions that can help advance the African Green Revolution. In fact, this project allows us to imagine doubling the number of farmers we reach and more effectively targeting and reaching those whose yield potential needs to be realized in order to really double yields on a national basis in places like Kenya. But we also know that success will require setting some new goals beyond agricultural productivity. So we're committing ourselves to, by 2050, helping the world shift diets towards protective foods in order to prevent 4 million premature deaths per year and reduce carbon emissions by 25 gigatons on an annual basis. Just to put that in perspective, that's 3 times the number of lives that would be saved if we eliminated all car accidents around the world. And it represents taking 30% of the entire global transportation fleet off of the global grid. Now, how will we get there? Our focus, like Seeds and Chips, is investing in market innovations that can make a tremendous difference. This is a photo of Twiga Foods, a Kenyan supply chain company that is using market innovations and modern data analytics to optimize its logistics in getting and reduce post-harvest yield loss for fruits and vegetables in Kenya. What we've seen is they've been able to help reduce post-harvest losses in fruits and vegetables specifically, which have gone from 30% to now less than 5% in areas where they're active. And that results in lower prices for fruits and vegetables, critical protective foods, for the entire population of Nairobi. In fact, a 15% decrease in those prices. We also admire and believe that innovations that help improve the sustainability of our food system are important and critical. This, of course, is a photograph of the Impossible Burger. This is a scientist named Pat Brown that many of you probably know, who spent years isolating the production of the heme protein, which is what gives red meat its unique flavor and cooking properties, and has produced a plant-based protein burger like Beyond Meat and others. This is now available throughout America at Burger King, at White Castle. In fact, I was in Texas the other day and at a local Mexican restaurant serving Impossible tacos. And the reality is, if that can be popular in that environment, Texas is the home of our livestock industry, in fact, we believe that it can have a tremendous impact on trying to achieve those carbon reductions we talked about relative to actual animal-produced protein. And we've seen real progress in policy. And at the end of the day, we believe market innovations are important but insufficient to actually change local and global food systems. In the United States, 30 million American children every day get food at breakfast and lunch through the United States School Lunch Program. It turns out this is a program that started in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s and grew out of legislation that helped farmers deal with surplus commodities. I served in the Department of Agriculture under President Obama, and in 2009, we actually had to take a significant amount of relatively low-quality salted cheese and remove it from the market by putting it in the U.S. school lunch program, which is what it's for in some sense, but leads to bad outcomes for health. So we changed that approach, and from 2010 onwards, we focused on improving the health content and the protective food content of American school lunches. And what we've seen is between 2010 and 2015, school lunches and breakfasts improved by more than 40% in just a 5-year period on that healthy eating index. This just shows us the power of procurement systems and public programs. The World Food Program, based right here in Rome, but reaching countries around the world, reaches 18 million children every day through school feeding programs, and these are highly vulnerable children. The Global Child Nutrition Foundation estimates that an additional 65 million children can be reached through public school lunch programs around the world, particularly in low-income countries. So we can create change in the way people consume food if we can change the structure, nature, and composition of these types of programs and adjust a broader set of public policies to make protective foods more prevalent and a greater part of diets at home and around the world. I'll conclude with this photograph of the Refettorio Ambrosiano right here in Milan. The Refettorio is a project of the Rockefeller Foundation and the famous chef Massimo Bottura and his Food for Soul program. His Food for Soul program in Italy and around the world has helped produce more than 450,000 meals for low-income and otherwise hungry people here in Italy and, in fact, in many other countries around the world. And in doing so, they've used 45 metric tons of recovered food. The reason I believe this is an important example is it demonstrates what I think you'll hear from those who will follow me today, that with vision and with commitment and with a higher aspiration, we can in fact achieve some extraordinary goals of changing our food system locally, nationally, and ultimately on a global basis. And at the Rockefeller Foundation, we believe we have to achieve that goal in order to protect both the health of our planet and the health of our people. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Danny Nierenberg, and I'm president of the research and advocacy organization FoodTech. I want to thank Raj Shah and all of the amazing speakers who are part of this event this morning. It's really an incredible honor to be here with all of you. And it's really good to be back in Italy. I am so lucky that I get to travel here several times a year, and I'm always reminded about how different it is than the small town in Missouri where I grew up. I am from a small town called Defiance, Missouri. And even though that feels very far away, it's also very close, because I think Italian culture and the kind of small town I grew up in are very close in how they both view food. In Italy, you know, food is really part of the cultural DNA. And I always find that Italy doesn't need a good food movement in the same way the United States does. The Italian culture really tends to treat food as less of a commodity and more like an invitation, as a vehicle not just to nourish us, but as a tool to build community, to convene, to mourn, to celebrate, and to break barriers. And while I know many Italians are concerned that the Italian way of eating is going away, I think so much of the world has a lot to learn from the Mediterranean diet and the impact that it can have both on our personal health and the health of the planet. And really, I think the whole world could use more Italian in their diets. And that's why this conference is so important. Marco and Sharon have really brought that Italian way of doing things to this conference around food and technology. And Seeds&Chips is such an exciting forum that leads to really incredible connections and long-lasting impact. They built something truly extraordinary, which I'll talk about later today as well. One of the most exciting and really interesting parts of my job in the food movement has been watching the growth of emerging technologies and their impact on farming, on communities, and how people eat all over the world. The topics of food and technology can really seem overwhelming, even to those of us who are working in this space every day. So I've decided the best way to share it with you this morning is to talk about 5 food tech innovations and collaborations that I think deserve more attention. I've had this really incredible opportunity over the last 15 or so years to really travel the world. I've visited 70+ countries at this point, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of farmers and researchers, scientists, extension workers, youth advocates, chefs, the whole range of stakeholders in the food system, and really learn from them and be able to share their stories of what's working on the ground to help alleviate hunger and poverty, combat food loss and food waste, and help mitigate and even reverse climate change. Technology, whether it's high or low tech, is helping address some of our most pressing problems in the food system, including helping rural youth find opportunities in agriculture, finding ways to protect biodiversity, finding ways to improve incomes, and addressing inequality between men and women. The first story that I want to share this morning comes from sub-Saharan Africa, where I probably spent the bulk of my time listening to farmers. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday in the opening ceremony, but several years ago, I met the social entrepreneur Eddie Mukibi, who is now vice president of Slow Food International. And he started his career helping young students learn about agriculture and using really creative ways to get them to appreciate the foods that are indigenous to Uganda. He encouraged young farmers to not only appreciate those foods, but to grow them, to sell them, to eat them. And he's, turning the tide and making these foods that used to be thought of as poor people's foods, the foods of the future, because of their resilience to pests and disease, drought and flooding, and other impacts of climate change. And he's used that information across continents to help ensure a sense of dignity and pride and really a sense of achievement for African foods and farmers. Today, as an agronomist and an advocate, Eddie is helping farmers in different ways by providing real-time information for planting, harvesting, dealing with pests and disease, and other critical farming techniques through cell phones. Sub-Saharan Africa, as many of you know, has more than 650 million cell phone subscribers. And if you consider that many rural families will share a single cell phone number, that number of people with access to a cell phone is much higher and constantly growing. We live in this really interesting time of really interactive mass communication on a scale that wouldn't have seemed possible even a few years ago. And in Uganda, in India, in the fields of the Midwest where I grew up, farmers are using cell phones and smartphones and tablets to get information that would often have taken them months or years before to get. So Eddie is helping farmers get more than information from these devices. He's also helping them make better decisions. And that will become critical as climate change takes a bigger hold across Africa and all over the world. The next example I want to share is also helping farmers make better decisions, and it comes from a former U.S. Marine. Craig Gansel is the founder and CEO of FarmWave, and he felt inspired to use what he learned in the Marines around technology to help improve the food system. FarmWave uses artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities to help farmers do things like track crop diseases and diagnose them and then share that information with other farmers. And I was just with Craig a few weeks ago at the Google Food Lab in Los Angeles, and it was really inspiring to hear him talk about using artificial intelligence and sometimes other scary sounding technologies and make them really real. He's helping farmers solve real problems that need to be solved. And I think that's, what is so great about that project. He's not just giving people a high-tech silver bullet. He's working with them to really develop the best uses of these technologies. The next example I want to share will help farmers in a different way by helping them do business better. And it comes from upstate New York. One of the founders of the National Young Farmers Coalition is a good friend and colleague of mine, Lindsay Lucier-Shute. And she has launched what is called the Farm Generations Cooperative. And the first project of the cooperative is an initiative called Grown By. And it's a sales platform to help direct market farmers grow their sales by linking them directly with clients and eaters. And I think this is going to be a really great tool, and I'm excited to see how it develops because it was developed by farmers for farmers. And that kind of participatory development is crucial as technology moves forward. And it will help young and new farmers especially be more successful with their farming practices and their farming business because they won't make the same mistakes that older farmers have made in the past. But along with Grown By, I don't think we can underestimate the need for providing appropriate technologies like rural broadband. Farmers of all ages want access to the internet, but often their connections are bad or non-existent. I often say that I have better internet and better cell phone service when I'm traveling in parts of the global south than I do when I'm traveling in parts of the rural Midwest. And really helping farmers who are on the most remote farms, whether again it's in the Midwest or in sub-Saharan Africa, will help them share more information and really learn from one another in different ways. The next example that I want to share comes from the Refresh Working Group, which is led by Google and the Swell Creative Group. For the last year, I've been part of this Refresh initiative, and its mission is to really build a conversation about the future of food and technology. The group wants to find ways to refresh the food system and really do that in ways that are beneficial for farmers, for eaters, for businesses, and for the whole range of stakeholders in the food system. We really view this as the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the costs and benefits and the opportunities and challenges of technology in the food system. Big data and artificial intelligence and all of the high and low technologies that we've been talking about this week will have implications both good and bad for how we produce and consume food in the future. We released a report with Refresh last year called Food and Tech from Soil to Supper that highlights some really creative examples of how technology is evolving not only for farmers, but for those that provide essential services for food distribution and access, and also gaining information. In the report, chef and CEO of Wholesome Wave, Michelle Nichon, describes how technology is enabling those most in need of better nutrition in the United States to use their SNAP, their Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamp benefits at farmers markets so that they can gain access to fresh and healthy food. And Melissa Brandau, the founder of Her Dog, highlights how the technology she developed is like a Fitbit for cows, helping ranchers and farmers track animal activity, location, and health in ways that they haven't been able to before. I think that what most excites me about being part of the Refresh project is the group's ability to bring so many different stakeholders together: farmers, Silicon Valley executives, engineers, public health advocates, policymakers, and people who are in the business of food production. It's really an unprecedented endeavor, and it gives me hope that one of the biggest and often most criticized technology companies in the world, Google, is helping lead this effort and willing to take critical feedback from all of us who are part of the group. And another reason that I joined the Refresh Working Group is that I believe that there's an opportunity to help advance the challenges and opportunities that women and youth face in agriculture. For women, being able to communicate over apps or the internet or use SMS technology may help eliminate gender barriers that often prevent them from getting information around markets or weather or make financial and banking transactions. And again, for youth, the challenges and excitement of being able to farm differently than their parents by using these technologies may want to help keep them in agriculture. It might keep them on farms because they see real economic opportunity there. But all of these technologies, from my viewpoint, will only work if they respect and recognize farmers' own knowledge and expertise, and if farmers are included in the process of research, development, and implementation, and if they solve problems that farmers actually need solving. I think there's a tendency for those in the technology sector to assume what problems farmers have and then come up with solutions, so-called solutions, to solve them without asking farmers first what they really need solved. These sorts of decisions really need to be more participatory in nature, and in some cases, I think will require a fundamental shift in how we do research and how we do outreach and how foundations allocate their funding. And that really leads me to my final example, which is this extraordinary forum that we're all at this week. Seeds&Chips has been bringing together innovators and entrepreneurs since 2015 and really giving them the space to showcase and highlight what they do. I'm so excited, especially this year, to see so many innovators from the global south and especially sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the world who have been combining high and low technologies for decades. I mentioned earlier today that I'm from Missouri, and our state motto is literally "show me." And that means we have to see it to believe it. So I think this conference allows all of us to really see what's happening in the food and tech space, acquire the wealth of knowledge that is happening here, connect to so many others, and continue the innovation that is happening here this week. Thank you so much for allowing me to share some of these examples with you. I really appreciate your time and look forward to talking to many of you this week.
I'm pleased to be with you here. I want to share some ideas that we call Save the Oceans, Feed the World. And the essence of that idea is that marine fish need to be a much bigger part of the plan to feed the world than they are now being thought of. Everybody will know that feeding the world has been recognized as a key problem and a key goal. It's in the United Nations Sustainable Goals. It's rooted in the sad facts that we have 750 million people now hungry, and we're headed for a world with 2 billion more people in it at a minimum by the middle of the century. These are commonly known. Why is it that we are not talking about feeding all those people with marine fish? Here's why. There's a misunderstanding rooted in the first part of this story. Here's the global fish catch from 1972 up until the mid-1990s, and it shows you a very reassuring picture. What happens then? It begins to decline. At the middle of the 1990s, we peaked, and if you project that forward, you see a steady decline to the middle of the century. This is why people are not thinking about using 71% of the planet to feed the future. It doesn't seem possible when you know this data. I'm here to tell you that that forecast is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of the opportunity. We can rebuild marine fish to high levels of abundance, and the opportunity is shown here to feed many, many more people from a rebuilt ocean than the world now understands. The difference is between business as usual and what we could do is, if you convert it into food for people, 1 billion people a day forever could be fed a healthy seafood meal every single day from a rebuilt ocean. And that's nearly 500 million people more than we're going to be feeding if we allow business as usual to proceed. That's the opportunity that I'm here to make sure you leave today understanding. Now, how do we do it? Technically, it's pretty simple. You stop overfishing, you reduce pollution, and you increase transparency to deter illegal activity. The most important of these three is you stop overfishing, and therefore I'm going to give you 3 components to that. Set and enforce scientific quotas, protect key habitat, reduce bycatch, and you will have a more abundant ocean. Why do I think that? I will show you some proof cases. Here is the spawning biomass of a fish, an Atlantic redfish, from 1959 or so until just last year. Let's see what happens. The vertical axis is biomass, weight of fish in the water. Huge overfishing. Wrecks the fishery. Then finally the policymakers intervene. What do? They impose quotas and a moratorium and bycatch. What happens? The fish come back. Here's another example. This is haddock on the Georges Bank. Again, on the vertical axis, biomass, overfishing again, decades and decades of it. Finally, the policymakers intervene, put fishing limits in place. What happens? The fish come back. 10 years, you can see a complete recovery. Here's the third example. These are the Arctic cod. They're not the famous Atlantic cod, which are a tragedy. These are their cousins on the other side of the Atlantic. Again, biomass on the vertical axis. What happens? We see overfishing again, decades of it, Finally, the policymakers intervene, discard ban imposed. What happens? The fish come back. This happens all over the world. If you will intervene after years of overfishing, and so shown here on data you can't read because they're too small, but they're from all over the world. After years of overfishing, policymakers intervene, and the fish come back. Now, this is possible because fishery management, unlike so many of the world's big problems, are not subject to the problems of international governance. It can be done country by country. The most productive parts of the world oceans are shown here in pink. They are coastal. And in the 1970s and 80s, they were nationalized. They were put under national jurisdiction. So country by country, the coastal countries can intervene and do fishery management, pollution control, and transparency, and get more fish. 9 countries in the European Union in their own oceans control 2/3 of the world's fish supply. 90% of the world's fish supply is in just 29 countries in the European Union. Now, nutritional benefits of this recovery are enormous. This is standard in the literature. Fish provide micronutrients that are essential to human health. If you ask the question, what share of the world's micronutrient deficient people who also eat a lot of fish are in the top 6 countries that have that condition, you will get another reassuring answer. 6 countries have 3/4 of the more than 600 million people in the world who depend on fish and eat a lot of micronutrients from their fish. This is a very accessible problem and opportunity for the world. You look at the micronutrient countries in the context of the global fish productive countries, you can see there's a nice overlap. Now, what are the benefits of this, in addition to feeding people and helping them with nutrition problems? Your doctor, she will tell you, switch from red meat, eat fish, and you will see benefits to your health. This is commonplace knowledge. It is a good way to feed the world if you're just worried about cost. This is data that shows the cost per gram, or whatever you want it to be, of livestock. And you want to be on the right-hand side of this data, the cheap end. I've got everything up here except fish. Where do fish come in? These are marine fish, as they now cost, on average around the world, very cost-effective. How about another dimension, fresh water, which is being depleted to drive agriculture, to feed livestock. You would like, again, to be on the right-hand end of this set of comparisons. How much fresh water is used in wild fish production? This is a trick question. None. Land. Here's another trick question. Land, a short resource, heavily in demand for livestock production. Here we see it across the familiar forms of human protein production. Guess what? You go to the ocean, you get animal protein for people to eat without competing for land. Greenhouse gases. A big producer, as Raj mentioned, of greenhouse production in the world is agriculture. Livestock is the most intensive form of agriculture. Huge amount of climate change being driven by livestock production. How does wild marine fish fit into this picture? In the middle, you have to burn some diesel to go catch the fish. But it's quite desirable compared to the other more intensive forms of greenhouse production. All these ideas drove us to want to bring you this recommendation, that the food conversation that everybody here at Seeds and Chips is engaged in, about how are we going to feed humanity in a growing planetary population, marine fish need to be a part of that conversation. There's a big opportunity that is not being seized. I wrote a book with Susanna Evans. If you're nice to me, I'll give you a copy of it. If you come to our panel at 4 o'clock today, the Oceania panel, we will give you some of those. My colleagues Susan Rockefeller, Rashid Sumaila, and Alexandra Cousteau and I will be sharing these ideas in more detail. It's my great pleasure to be with you today. Thanks very much.
Hello, everyone. What an incredible panel, and it's truly an honor to be here. My name is Lauren Pradhan. I'm the founding managing director for Grow North, a part of the Home Center for Entrepreneurship, and I lead an initiative focused on accelerating and connecting Minnesota's ecosystem for food and agriculture, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I've spent my entire career in food, working for over 12 years at General Mills, a multinational food company, and now, with building and growing Grow North, I work with entrepreneurs and startups every day. And I can say that as we think about the challenges of our food system, collaboration between the big and the small is essential to drive the scale of change that we all want to see. As we discuss global challenges today and throughout this week, I am excited to talk about driving change at the local scale and at the state and regional level, and thinking about ways that each day we can drive community in a way that I like to think of as human-based ecosystem building. But in order to do that, I need you to take a trip with me. I need you to take a trip with me to the United States and to Minnesota, which I'm guessing many of you didn't think you were going to be talking about today. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about Minnesota. Minnesota is in the heartland of the United States, where much of the world's food production is made. We've been innovating in food for over 150 years when farmers were growing grain and crops and sending it down the Mississippi River. And now, Minnesota, is home to 19 Fortune 500 companies from farm to fork, including 5 of the largest food and agribusiness companies in the world, with General Mills, Land O'Lakes, Cargill, CHS, and Hormel. We have over 73,000 acres of farmland of all sizes, $6.9 billion in exports, accelerators, incubators, commercial kitchens, including Techstars Farm to Fork, the only Techstars accelerator focused on food and ag tech. We also have the University of Minnesota, which is a leader in food and agribusiness that also has a center for plant sciences, sustainable polymers, health, wellness, and is also the home of Grow North. And 90,000 people who are working in food, agribusiness, and water technology, just in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area alone. And we also have incredible startup activity, going from farm to fork. But I wanted to just give you a flavor of what's happening. And so we have Recombinetics, a fast-growing startup that's focused on gene editing for animal health. Forever Green, which is a platform out of the University of Minnesota that is developing perennial crops for regenerative agriculture, including Kernza, which many of you might have heard of, and you can see at the Future Market out in the area outside. Conservice, which is a farm tech management platform which recently partnered with Rabobank, bringing together farm tech and fintech together. And also Local Crate, which is developing a regional ecosystem to scale local through meal kit production. Yet while all this was happening, we had so much activity that things were happening in silos. And people started talking and saying, are these silos stopping us from innovating and living to our true potential? And that's where a question started forming across all these different groups, large, small, entrepreneur, for-profit, and nonprofit. Could an initiative look at this ecosystem and start working across the big and the small to drive connectivity and make the sum larger than the parts? Could this initiative create programming and fill gaps so that we can give entrepreneurs the tools that they need day in and day out so they could scale their ideas faster and smarter to drive the change in the food system that we all want as we talk about it here this week? And that was the challenge that I took on when I was asked to lead Grow North. But like any good business leader, I did a listening tour and started to talk to many of the companies that we're going to be talking about. And I would hear about the passion in our community, and I would hear about the energy around entrepreneurship and innovation. But at the same time, I would hear that there were challenges, that there were resources helping entrepreneurs, but they craved the industry knowledge that was in a lot of our large corporations. that a lot of the industry professionals that worked at those corporations wanted to help entrepreneurs but didn't have easy pathways to get there. That resources like grants, conferences like this, even a good lawyer, a good support organization, were hard to find out about and only were seen through word of mouth. And so that visibility stifled opportunity. That many of the farmers in our community would hear about innovation and felt like it wasn't as relevant to their day-to-day operations. And so how could they get more involved in creating the future of food that they wanted to be a part of? And finally, entrepreneurs, and for all the entrepreneurs in the audience, entrepreneurs know they want everything. They want more connectivity, more resources, more capital. But also they wanted to be a visible part of our community, and they wanted to feel a part of something. And so that's when it hit me. We had the energy, we had the talent, we had the resources, like many of you in this room. But what we needed was connectivity. What we needed was collaboration, connectivity across the big and the small. What was happening, like what's happening here at Seeds&Chips now, they wanted this type of connectivity to happen day in and day out at a local level so that entrepreneurs could scale their ideas. And that's what we've decided to do at Grow North. We focus on connectivity to resources, ideas, information, and to a shared goal about where we want our state to go in the support of innovation. We focus on connectivity that will make faceless organizations into individuals that can be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so, in so doing, we create a virtuous, interconnected, and sophisticated and supportive ecosystem that enables entrepreneurs to scale their businesses faster and make a bigger impact. But how to do this? So sometimes it's easier to talk about what Grow North is not. We are not an accelerator, an incubator, or a business development center, that we're inspired by them all and work with them throughout our state. But we try to take the best of what each one is doing. And so what we've done is we've launched a digital hub at grownorthmn.com where we host resources throughout the state to be a one-stop shop and a welcome to the entrepreneurs in our community and entrepreneurs who want to enter our community. We host education and inspirational series of events and speakers. So we create easy pathways for connectivity for industry experts throughout our state, as well as from around the world, to come and join our community. We lead connectivity and networking programming focused on authentic connections that happen both in our state and around the country in the United States. We've also launched a large series of events called Food Ag Ideas Week, which happens in October, which is a multi-day series of events and convenings designed to really elevate our community and be an invitation to participate. And so now you can consider all of you invited to that event in October. And then finally, we grow and share this story with our leaders, and we tell it as much as we can. But this programming is not something that Grow North does alone. This is what I do with some of my partners. And as you can see, these partners that I work with across the state are big, they are small, they are for-profit, they are nonprofit, they are entrepreneurs, they are farmers, and they've all come together with this shared belief that we as an ecosystem want to cultivate a place of opportunity for the problem solvers and innovators that want to champion change in our food system. And that's why platforms like this are so important, because it is that connectivity that will take nameless faces and logos and organizations and make them into people who want to come together to build that ecosystem and come together not just once a year, but every day, because it is the important thing of sending the email, of having the coffee, of taking the call, of showing entrepreneurs that we are present and we are supportive of their efforts that makes an ecosystem virtuous and continue and fertile for new ideas and innovation. And I fundamentally believe that we are all active members in making that possible. And if we do so in creating this fertile community that entrepreneurs feel supported in and invested in, we are going to scale on a local and state and regional level the ideas that are going to drive incredible global change. So consider this a coffee conversation that we have had together. And if you're thinking about what to do on a local level or in your community or what's happening in my community, please reach out. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
Under 30.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, I met with 150 Australian cattle and sheep farmers to talk about producing meat without livestock. Some people thought I was crazy. And I'll admit I was a bit nervous and uncertain walking in. How did they respond? I'll tell you in a minute. But first, some context. We know that billions of people eat meat worldwide for its deeply entrenched personal, cultural, and economic significance. That significance, however, is almost always tied to the experience meat provides rather than the production process. Very few people eat meat because it's produced via animal rearing, let alone animal deaths. People eat meat for a whole variety of reasons, but animals have just been the mechanism that we rely on to convert plants into meat. A big problem is they're very inefficient at doing that, but it's all we've had until now. Science and culinary innovators around the world are showing us that by going directly to plants or by producing animal meat by feeding cells nutrients, we can enjoy what we love about sausages and burgers and dumplings, the taste, the nutrition, the convenience, but with far less space, far less water, far fewer greenhouse gas emissions and risk of fecal contamination, and no antibiotics. Diversifying food supply with plant-based alternatives and cell-based meat can bring huge benefits for people, public health, and our planet. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars invested into this space recently, including by meat giants. Beyond Meat broke records just days ago with its IPO, and some of the biggest food outlets are now releasing new options, including Burger King. Competition is on to be the leading market. The US remains in first place with greatest investment in R&D and startups. Israel has become a hub for cellular agriculture innovation. The Singaporean government just dedicated tens of millions of dollars to new research, and more startups are emerging across Europe. My organization, Food Frontier, which is a think tank and industry accelerator, is helping Australia and surrounding nations become the next epicenter for plant and cell-based protein innovation. Now, you might think, isn't Australia the most unlikely country to be leading in this? A nation known the world over for its livestock production, its outback, its meat barbies, which are barbecues, for those of you who don't speak Aussie. Why would we change? The Australian landmass is huge, almost the size of continental USA, and almost half of that land is used to produce meat and dairy, much of which is exported. That's the equivalent landmass of most of Europe. More than 300,000 people are employed by the Australian farm sector, and meat farming is ingrained in Australia's national identity. The farmer in an akubra hat on his vast land occupied by cattle or sheep, it's an iconic and distinctly Australian image. Does this make us the unlikeliest country to lead in alternative proteins? No. I believe it makes us exceptionally well placed. Let me explain why. Australia has an incredibly strong reputation for quality food production and innovation, and our products are highly sought after across the growing Asian middle class. We have extensive agricultural infrastructure, a diverse climate, world-class research capabilities, and well-established and direct trade channels into the world's most populous region. All factors that we can use to diversify into new forms of protein for Australia and the world. I'm here to tell you that Australia is already on its way to becoming a leading market in plant-based meat alternatives and cell-based meat. At Food Frontier, in the last 18 months alone, we have supported 6 startups emerging in the space, advised several large Australian meat manufacturers on diversifying their product lines, and consumer interest is rising rapidly. So, what on earth do Australian livestock farmers think about all of this? Well, I recently met with 150 of them, and I have to say that my presentation was met with great interest, openness, and curiosity. There were many excellent questions, and the majority of the people in the room got it, which isn't really surprising. Farmers are some of the most savvy people in our society. They're entrepreneurial, they're adaptive, they are in touch with evolving environmental and economic conditions. There was a recognition in the room that we need new ways of producing people's favorite foods into the future, and that alternative proteins can be complementary to traditional forms of agriculture. Some saw an opportunity for potential diversification into new products and production systems. So if farmers, these farmers, the very people whose livelihoods are currently based on rearing livestock, are able to acknowledge the need for new ways of producing tasty protein and willing to step up to the plate to do so, why aren't some of the folks who are representing them following suit? One of the most disappointing things that I've seen around the world is agricultural industry and political representatives trying to frame progress as a problem, a threat that should be feared and fought. Not only do I believe this is inaccurate, it's irresponsible. From Australian conservative politicians claiming that plant-based foods are harming Aussie farmers, to the American ranching lobby actively working to drive restrictive regulations, this kind of behavior is counterproductive. Sitting down with the constituents of these representatives, farmers, you realize they understand better than most the reality of our food system, how it's changing, and how critical it is that we find and be open to more sustainable ways forward. Of course, there is much to discuss about new methods and where and how they integrate with current systems. But if those who claim to be a voice for farmers genuinely care about these people's livelihoods, let's work together to involve primary producers in this rapidly emerging sector and speak for those farmers who are already supplying and benefiting from the fast-growing multi-billion-dollar market for plant-based meat and dairy alternatives. Because anyone who suggests alternative proteins aren't going to be a significant part of our food system in the future is ignorant to the data and the sound advice of world-leading experts. Let's embrace this change. Diversifying our food supply is a matter of future-proofing economies, livelihoods, and the ability for humankind to survive and thrive. There's too much at stake to play politics on these issues. The world's leading scientists have told us loud and clear, from Eat Lancet to Chatham House, that soon, without drastic change, it will become impossible to meet the world's demand for meat without driving environmental conditions to the point of threatening human survival in the long term. And they tell us the next 1 to 2 decades are the most critical to turn this around. We must make decisions based on evidence and science, not knee-jerk protectionist and short-sighted opinion. And we all play a part, from scientists to policymakers, investors to corporations, even agricultural bodies, and of course, farmers. As the head of New Zealand's beef and lamb peak body, Rod Slater, said about a major meat producer launching a plant-based mince product, someone in the industry is showing initiative, so I take my hat off to them. I don't care, it's not traditional mince at all, and I don't think they do either as a meat company. Now that is smart, forward-thinking leadership. We are one global community, a shared humanity. I just turned 23. In 15 years, when I'm 38, and the global population is approaching 9 billion, protein consumption is soaring, and the critical IPCC deadline to avoid climate catastrophe has passed, I want to be confident that everybody in our society will have access to safe, delicious, nutritious, and sustainable food moving forward, and have access to clean water and clean air. Who agrees that that should be our future? Of course we all do. To get there, we need drastic change, which includes transforming our protein supply. It's critically important that we act quickly with evidence and empathy and work collaboratively, not combatively, towards a brighter food future. Australia can get there, and if the country at the end of the earth full of outback graziers and meat-filled barbies can do it, you can too. 15 years from now, when I'm 38, I want to think about humanity and our food source with hope and confidence, not fear and uncertainty. And 70 years from now, and I'm 93 and still kicking, I want to look back on my life and feel that I played my part with the time, resources, and influence I had to transform our food supply and society for the better. Who wants to feel the same way about their life and legacy? Thank you.
Under 30.
At the peak of her success, one terrible moment transformed Heather's life. As she crossed a busy London street, a speeding police motorcycle smashed into her. At 24, Heather lost her left leg below the knee.
Fortunately for the thousands of people around the world who've been afflicted by mines and lost limbs, she's put that dogged determination towards helping them.
From her earliest years, Heather Mills has faced adversity with courage and optimism.
Heather keeps busy with her work as an activist, philanthropist, author, and entrepreneur.
What I'd overcome at that point meant my self-belief meant that I could do anything.
People never thought that an amputee, man or woman, could skate, because it had never been done before.
Heather was 25 when she had her left leg amputated below the knee, following an accident with a police motorcycle in 1993, winning 4 gold medals at the US National Championships in Aspen in March.
You ready?
And the guns.
Not much in it. This is a cracking race. They're probably the 2 best skiers in the competition.
It is Heather! It's this one. Make a plan in your head. What lifestyle do you want and why are you trying to achieve it? So it's all about creating solutions.
What I'm trying to do is make Newcastle the plant-based valley of the world. 130 products, we go to 24 countries, we have the biggest breadth of vegan products in the world.
So never underestimate who you are and how important you are when working with a team.
Wouldn't you want that 3 billion saved, put into the NHS, put into nursing?
The interest of Heather Mills in acquiring this site for one of those exciting new businesses of the future.
You know what, money doesn't mean anything unless you're going to make a difference with it.
Between the 3 factories, between 300 to 500 jobs.
So that's how V-Bites came about, and I built it up. I know that the vegan business is going to be the future forever.
So I just thank Heather Mills for the person she is and the work that she does for all of us. God bless you, Heather.
Hi everybody. So I've got 10 minutes to tell you as quickly as I can how to solve the world food problems. 26 years ago, I lost my leg, left one, liked to challenge people's perception of disability, told I wouldn't be able to walk, ski, rollerblade, and everything else I went on to do. There was nothing available at the time, so I developed prosthetic limbs, most of them that you see in all the Paralympics. Once that happened, I realized there was a huge problem system with recyclable limbs, so we created the biggest landmine clearing and prosthetic charity in the world, and then that problem was solved and still ongoing. And then I had an infection in my leg after it was chopped off, crushed pelvis, punctured lung, when I came back from the war, which was quite strange, because why didn't it happen in the war? And I couldn't heal myself. I was in hospital for 5 months, 1993, and they kept feeding me really disgusting food. So my girlfriend bound into the office, and she said into the bedroom, which I had become an office, which is another story. And I was there flat on my back for 5 months, and she said, you have to get out of this hospital and this terrible food they are feeding you. So she dragged me off to a place called Hippocrates in West Palm Beach, and shoved me full of wheatgrass juice and all these disgusting tasting things and said, you have to go vegan. And I was a north of England girl, and I liked my meat and my, you know, all my fish and my things. So I didn't want to do it, but I did it because they kept chopping my leg more and more. Then I missed, after being raw vegan for 2 years when I was completely healed, I missed being with my family, going for pizza, having a burger, having a hot dog. So I started to develop and study food science and nutrition and make the first burgers. You hear about Beyond Meat and all these burgers. We've been doing them for 26 years. There's nothing really innovative about them, to be honest. The Impossible Burger, yes, but I wouldn't promote something that's made from a cell because you don't know what's going to happen within your body years down the line from something that's made this way. Perfect burgers can and have been made from plants. But ultimately, as many of the speakers before me have explained, the future growth of the population is so much so that maybe even plants aren't going to be enough to produce, because 1 minute quinoa is the favor, and then there's not enough quinoa, and then it's going to be coconut, and there's not enough that. So the most important thing that we do, we produce 140 products for 24 countries. We have the largest plant-based valley in the world. We have been very much under the radar for 26 years, and now we've come back because the time is ready now. So we have been providing these products for a long time to prescription meals for hospitals, to food service, to supermarkets for private label. From the first base, soy was the original. Because if you make a soy burger, you save 93% water and up to 99% energy than making a normal burger. That's putting it in the simplest ways. So farmers get subsidies in Britain of 3 billion a year. So we've been teaching them how to convert a lot of their land to growing potatoes. So we use the potato to make a starch. To growing oats, we make a protein isolate from oats. And pea protein, we've been making gluten-free pea protein products for nearly 16 years. So the next level is this. Hopefully it's going to work. Yeah, algal oils. So we own the highest level EPA and DHA algal oil, and we grow it in huge vats, and every 2.5 tons we grow, we deplete CO2 by 1.5 tons. Most people think that omega-3 comes from fish, and it doesn't. It comes from the algae the fish eat. So we have a different discussion with Andrew and everything he's explained. If you want to enjoy a piece of fish, then that's the way to go. But if you want to stop the use of catching fish and making them into these tiny little capsules that they sell in the health food store, it's completely crazy to catch fish, to squeeze them, to get oil out of them when the oil originally comes from the algae. Now the problem is there are thousands of algae, billions of algae, and they all have different levels of DHA and EPA. DHA is docosahexaenoic acid, brilliant for brain function, synovial fluid, all sorts of things. EPA, very much equivalent to a percentage of an SSRI, so an antidepressant. So we were blocked by America for 12 years not to put our algae out, because you can imagine the pharmaceutical industry don't want something out that's less expensive unless they own it. And the same thing happened with the meat and the dairy industry. So we have the first allergen-free coconut cheese, which I developed for a young person in Great Ormond Street Hospital who had half a digestive system. This particular fat was very easy to digest with no allergens. But the future is omega-3. It really is microalgae. We are making smoked salmon, scampi, fish steaks, all sorts of things from algae, biomass, and from konjac. At the moment, the #1 best-selling vegan alternate in the UK in Green King pubs is a fish steak. So it's like the fish fillet that McDonald's did many years ago, but it tastes exactly the same, but it's good for you. So we basically have created a company called V-Bites, And under it, we have 43 companies and brands. So what I've done over the years is to invest. I have a company called V-Bites Ventures, and we invest in small startups who are trying to scale, so they don't have to sell out to hedge funds and private equities and lose the majority of their company. So we manufacture for them. We have over 600,000 square feet of factories, 4 all close together in Newcastle, in the north of England. And we basically manufacture everything that you eat every day. We can do prosciutto. We can do every kind of favorite food there is. So it's all already available. The reason we couldn't make it huge is because until the meat and dairy industry took us seriously, which is what's happened now, and realized that they have to have these options for consumer choice, we were always blocked by growing exponentially. But now the Beyond Meat burger, which is a very simple recipe, but has been brilliantly marketed because the Americans do it the best, has gone into the market for 1-point-something billion in shares. The problem they're going to have is scalability, because they don't have the facilities that we have to scale up to the level of demand. So we've done it the other way around, where we already manufacture, we've done it for 26 years, and we have the scalability. Many years ago, you could make vegan cheese in a dairy factory, but you can't anymore. You should never have anyway, but now the eyes are watching around the world, and people have died, people have illnesses, and no matter how much you think your factory worker will clean the machinery perfectly, they don't always do that. So the cross-contamination continues. So vegan products can never be made safely and responsibly in a factory that also manufactures meat and dairy. And that's why they need to be made in facilities like ours and other people that are trying to grow these things. But the future will be algal oil. And when people understand that they can get accessibility to it, and that's where the biggest problem lies, is making the supermarkets, and especially in Italy, I'm not being rude, but you're so far behind consumer choice, yet the millennials and their children are so smart, they want to have healthier foods that's going to help climate change. You know, we had big climate change marches in the UK, and then some people went to McDonald's. You can't be caring about climate change and not be vegan. It's not possible. It's the #1 cause. We wrote the papers on it over 20 years ago. So even if you can't be vegan, try and be a flexitarian. And the reason we make these products is to give the chance for people with their addiction to the opioid of cheese an alternate to get them over the bridge to the whole foods. Ultimately, no processed food should be eaten, but that's not reality. We have realism and idealism. And when we donated $1 million to the Bronx and we got all the kids over the bridge, that's why the New York Coalition for Healthy School Foods continued to get vegan options in schools, even though when we donated it, they didn't want it. You have to replace a burger for a burger. So I have to stop now. Thank you very much. For a vegan burger, I mean.
Good morning, Seeds and Chips community. I'm going to introduce you an idea I've been working on in the last 8 months during a kind of a sabbatical. Virtuous agriculture. It's about fixing climate change. I've been committing to climate change since 1984, even before the foundation of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And recently, we made a lot of work together with the coffee community in order to find solutions how to adapt to climate change. But it's not only about adaptation. We also need mitigation. Yes, climate change is the top urgency because of the fatal and irreversible damages it's creating. It's literally depriving us from the living condition on the planet. So decarbonization is the priority because everything is triggered by greenhouse gases. And this is the highest priority of all sustainability causes. Did you know that in 50 years, the entire society needs to become carbon negative? If you look at the curves, which have been designed in order to reach the Paris Climate Agreement, it's incredible. Agriculture accounts for 25% of carbon emissions. So this is, the good news is that soil is also a gigantic carbon sink. Soil, through organic matter, can contain as much as 3.5 times the carbon in the air, plus reforestation. So, regenerative agriculture, which exists since many decades, has a high carbon efficiency, so can dramatically improve this 25%. But it's also bringing other positive effects, like increased fertility, biodiversity, water conservation, and much less dependence from agrochemicals. So the consumer is the actor of change, the very first one. But the problem is that consumer decides upon health, taste, price, and eventually sustainability. So that means that to push the market towards regenerative agriculture, we need products which are at the same time healthy or even better, beneficial for health. So the grower is the second actor of change because regenerative agriculture must represent a better business than the conventional one. So differentiation, if you sell better products and more healthier, you will get a premium price. So higher profits. Also because the good news is that the cost of production of regenerative agriculture is lower, even though productivity is also lower. So there is a very complex balance in all factors. What you grow, where you grow, how you grow, when you grow, with what you grow, and so on. And also the market dependency. How much you charge, where is the price of the market, and so on. Very high complexity. So this brings me to this idea of the virtuous agriculture cycle. Regenerative for the environment, beneficial for consumers, premium for growers. But the problem is that this cycle is hyper-complex. You are literally bringing together thousands or tens of thousands of different variables which are totally intertwined. And the problem of complexity is that it is not linear. So as long as we continue to start trying fixing problems in a linear way, we will not be able to make it. And this is the fundamental approach of the virtuous agriculture strategy. So with virtuous agriculture, when you have to deal with complexity, constraints like standards simply do not work. And this is why the strategy is to start, first of all, referencing all these possible virtuous agriculture practices. There are many around, but which are there? How do you describe them? How do you apply them? So referencing. After referencing, ranking them. make a clear ranking by attributes. What is what is deliverable, what works, what doesn't work. This will open the way to a reporting standard. Every corporation has to do a balance sheet every year and file it in the exact same way. The idea is to build a virtuous agriculture network, a community, where all these reports will be filed in order to be accessible to all the stakeholders involved. And with these reports, if growers, besides having ranked virtuous, they could access to a rating in order to show consumers if the rating is higher or lower and differentiate. So, organization-wise, the idea to build and feed this virtuous agriculture idea is an open innovation network. We all need to be on board. There are a huge amount of initiatives around. Literally every grower practices his own specific agronomical practices. Many times there is a lot of empirism. We need science, we need information, we need data, we need even marketing for that. This is the idea to try to create an environment. So the goals for virtuous agriculture would be, first of all, contributing to mitigation of carbon emission by ranking the most virtuous agronomical practices. The Paris Conference on Climate already established a goal, which is called 4 per thousand. 4 per thousand is a goal of sequestrating carbon by enriching soil with organic matter. But we don't know how really feasible it is and in which conditions. And this would be the purpose of virtuous agriculture, open innovation network. Second goal is accelerating the development of virtuous agriculture through this open innovation network. And I want to be very clear with that. Everybody needs to be on board. Whoever is in the room, everybody, simply everybody needs to participate to this endeavor. Otherwise, it will not work. If we start having detractors, if we have starting people with their own specific agenda, this will not work. I will keep it for myself, for my beautiful coffee, and will be finito. But I think it's something relevant for all of us. So, if we are all together, the goal will be making virtuous agriculture more competitive than conventional agriculture. Conventional agriculture is really reaching at limits, which are not only environmental and nutritional, but also in terms of profitability, because each point of extra margin productivity that growers seek, it costs more and more to the point it's becoming unprofitable. So as the next steps, first of all, get the feedback from the Seeds&Chips community. Go, no go, by September I will decide whether to create a scientific committee or not. If yes, the scientific committee will have a goal, a task to develop and define the research program, and with that we will establish a governance and start funding and represent next year. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, how are you all feeling? I'm feeling great. Wonderful to be here, and thank you for having me. I was lucky enough to have a father that is a professor of surgery, and he was the first to talk about diet causing chronic disease in traditional medical circles. So I grew up knowing that diet was a really, really important part of wellness. My mother's a medical scientist, but she also too looked at nutrition and the importance of nutrition in the blood and dealing with chronic diseases. From that learning and seeing what a hard time my father got suggesting that diet was causing disease a good 40 years ago, I decided to become an entrepreneur. I went and did my apprenticeship in a big entertainment company, and then I got into nutrition, back home to what I'd learnt a lot about. We became the fastest growing company in nutrition and in pharmacies across the world for 10 years running. We sold our business after being number one in China, top 5 here in Italy, number 1 in Australia, and launching in over 20 different countries. It was a wonderful thing to do because now it's set me free. Set me free to follow my purpose. And my purpose is to ask you a question. Has anyone been in a bad relationship? Bad girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife? Yeah? How bad was that for your health? How ordinary was it? And until you got out of it afterwards, people said how much of a better person you are today as a result of moving on from that relationship. Now, I talk to people in their workplaces where we spend the majority of our working time in a bad relationship, in a bad place. And this is the fundamental issue with our society, that until we start loving ourselves and loving those around us, we will be able to love the world we live in. Our mind decides what we do. Our mind needs to be in the best possible state possible, so we eat and we choose the right things to do. So Light Warrior is all about bringing light to the world and being conscious about the decisions we make, aware of our footprint, aware of where we're moving, doing things with purpose. One of our investments is in My DNA, personalised nutrition. Our DNA shouldn't be something we fear to learn about. It shouldn't be something that, we're going to find out that we're suddenly going to get cancer or die of some disease that we may not have control over. In fact, 99% of our genes can be controlled and be nurtured through good diet and right exercise choices. So our platform is about helping you understand what works right for you. I should live in Italy. When I did the test, I found out that I need a Mediterranean diet. And these are the secrets that you can unlock about your health. I also found out that I'm prone to injuries, so I need to make sure that I spend extra time in managing my injuries. I found out that if I drink coffee, I'll be able to sleep 6 to 8 hours later. Some people can sleep 2 hours later or an hour later. Others will have to wait 12 to 16 hours. All important facts that enables us to take control of our health. If I eat that Mediterranean diet, I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to have less weight. And so our product is really, really useful for those that are delivering wellness programs, diet programs, personal trainers, and helping you with the optimal exercise package. So we partner with gyms, we partner with all sorts of operators through to pharmacy, where we also can tell you what nutrition you require beyond just your food. So I'm prone to needing to supplement calcium, also iron. And if I don't supplement for those two mechanisms, again, my DNA may weaken and I'll be more likely to be prone to a chronic disease. So this is our platform. We rate everything on the basis of science and evidence, and there's a scale rating there. We've also got the very special opportunity where you can have a free test at the Australia stand. Please come and see us. You'll be able to get your free DNA test, and we'll have it back to you in 2 weeks, where you'll have your own porthole and you'll be able to access all of this amazing data on how you can optimise your personal nutrition and life. Another investment of ours is Made by Cow. Now, this one here got through the ultimate test. My wife's English. We enjoy an English tea every morning, English breakfast tea, and we obviously have to have a little bit of milk in it. Now, I delivered this tea to my wife of a morning, and I watched her drink it, and she goes, "Oh, wow, what are the new tea bags?" And I said, no, it's the milk. And she said, "Wow, that tastes like tea used to taste." And we used to get our glass bottles of milk delivered to our doors with cream on the top, and it was closer to milk how it should be. So we discovered this wonderful process that we have, the patent on, which is cold compression of the milk. And essentially that cold compression of the milk enables the milk to last for 8 weeks, kills all the microbes, but retains the enzymes that help us with digestion and help us absorb the nutrition from this wonderful superfood that milk should be. not boiled to buggery and something you can't drink, which is what pasteurisation is, but keeping it alive, like cold-pressed olive oil. How much better does cold-pressed olive oil taste compared to a boiled blot of vegetable oils? So this product is unique. We use pesticides-free cows, hormone-free cows, and they're all from the single block there. So we're very, very excited by that product. So for us, it's when you're transforming food industries, it's about having products that are tailored for individuals, because all of us are different. So what might be great for me is a Mediterranean diet. You might need a vegetarian diet, or you might need a diet high in carbs. We need to know this detail, and it's a simple saliva test that you can do on a child. Can you imagine knowing all of these important facts about the most important person to your children coming up, so as you can make sure that they live the healthiest possible lives and also do the right sort of exercises so it supports their body to live to its optimum. Advanced food manufacturing. This is the way forward, and a lighter touch on our earth without using pesticides, considerate of our footprint, and continue to evolve and making sure that we're smart and conscious about our thinking in how we invest. We need to think about not only the now, the past, but the future in everything we do. And our minds are the key in determining this outcome. So we need to create workplaces that are extraordinary places to be. People love being a part of it. So then when you love being part of it, you love so much more around you, and the world becomes a better place as a result. Change and product differentiation is so key. Deloitte's done a ton of research on this. I'm using their name for credibility, but in retail, if you don't change, it's clinically shown that you'll go backwards with your sales of 1% at least per year. But if you're innovative and you have product differentiation, you focus on experience, you grow it over 10%. And we see this in our funds portfolios that we invest in. If you categorise conscious investments, they, time and time again, grow at more than double, 10 times, than those investments that aren't focused on innovations, aren't considering our conscious footprint. So who here's been to a personal trainer here? Can you imagine that personal trainer said to you in your first session, 10 push-ups, and after 5 push-ups, they say to you, you look exhausted, you're not going to get through this session. It wouldn't be a great session. But I can tell you now that our workplaces are like working with that awful personal trainer who isn't giving you a leg up. Is your workplace environment about lifting and helping us deal with change? Because we, as humans, are creatures of habit. We've even got a saying for it. We don't like change. We need to encourage change. We need to reinforce that it's a good thing. So for us to move forward, we not only need to deal with culture and society to deal with the food issues going forward. Thank you very much for your time.
So good morning. I've got a tough role, right? I'm the number 9th on the crew. I'm between essentially the lunch and the rest. So it's a long, long day. So let me tell you what I'm here for. I'm here for to basically talk to you about my home country, France, Europe, and also the relationship with Italy. My name is Pascal Cagni. I'm very pleased, and thank you to Marco Gualtieri to organizing FoodTech and AgTech and essentially Seeds&Chips. I'm a special animals. I'm going to basically pitch you about why you should all come in France and deal more with this. Well, in the meantime, I came from a long background in the industry. I've been running Apple in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India for 13 years. But at Apple, we're very, very conscious of the importance of the food tech. I also became an investor. And in this respect, when you come to Seeds&Chips, you fully understand that the world is changing and the disruptions that we did with the iPhone and a few others is critical. But really, the reasons of my presence is because I've been nominated by President Macron as ambassador to foreign investments, which means that essentially we want to attract more investment in France, and we believe that we've got a lot to offer. But prior to talk to you about the great asset of France, let me just recall a bit of some of the challenges that many of the previous speakers have been talking and describing over the past essentially an hour and a half. I could identify essentially 6 core challenges. The first one has been clearly stated. We are going to be 7 billion, and most likely we're on the trajectory of $11 billion populations. It's enormous, and the accelerations is mind-blowing. The second core is that the environmental concern has been never as hot as today. What we call the overshoot day is most likely going to come earlier in July. That's the time where planet Earth will have been basically giving the best it can, and that will basically be using more than the planet can renew in 1 year. So that's the second core challenge. The third challenges that you have heard of is obviously the health concern raised and related to the food traceability, right? That's critical, and several startups here, and especially on the French book of Business France, addressing this issue. But we got also the new lifestyle, which are leading to bad eating habits, with the big issue worldwide of obesity. I've been living 14 years in UK. I've seen how obesity was becoming a real public issue, which was taking the headlines all over the places. The fifth one is the animal well-being, which is becoming finally a shared concern. We talked of that. And the one that is also critical is the food distribution, which is putting very much strain on the small producers. So all of that to basically drive one conclusions and imperatives that for a need for more and better responsible food. Now, coming from a background of technology, I have the weakness to believe that, yes, the accelerations in technology that we have seen, that's a slide that I extracted from Singer University, is a way to address challenges. And what I will try to focus on is really showing how in my country, in France, we are trying to be, we're not trying, we are becoming, or we are being, a leader in food tech and ag tech. Now, to do that, I will try to articulate my points around 4 core elements. The first one is that clearly France has got a clear leadership in agro-food. Now, that's something we compete and we fight with Italy. And you should know that lately in Paris, we had the opening of Italy store in Central Europe, Paris, with Gary Lafayette as a partnership, which we are very pleased to have. And we also have La Felicita, which is the place to go right now in Station F, which is serving the largest number of plates on a daily basis. So that's a way to talk about leaderships. Another way to look at our leadership is to look at this amazing application called La Liste, where out of 628 guides, thousands of trusted reviews, you essentially list the best restaurants. And while we got a lot of competitions, there is still 28 of them which are coming from France, not enough actually from Italy. And being from Italian blood and origins, I can tell you this is wrong, because Italy is also doing a fantastic job in this regard. But if I'm getting a little more serious about the leadership, is really talking about the industry and the fact that we have some of the worldwide best agri-food players, both as a producer, as a distributor, or in the restaurants. You know names like Danone, Lactalis, but also large retailers, or the Sodexo of this world, for just naming a few. So if you agree on this statement that essentially we've got a leadership, we need also to recognize that for us, the agri-food business in France is critical. It represents close to 200 billion of revenue. It represents 61,000 companies, but also 20% of the total industry that we do. So not only we're doing the good old industry, which is mechanicals, automotive, but the agro-food business is huge. Now, once I said that, I want also to show you that we're also leaders in the technology. And that's something I want to really carry as a message to you. You have been seeing France for many years as essentially the country of the art de vivre. Yes, we knew how to do cars and aerospace, but there is something also which is now finally revealing itself, which is that we have an amazing pool of talent and technologies at the heart of the strategy of the President Macron. The leadership in technology can be illustrated by the fact that we've got a pool of talent second to none. There is millions of engineers in France, some of the best engineering schools, and we read that if you combine that with the research centers, including the INRA, Institut National de la Recherche Agronomique, which is the second largest agricultural research institute in France, we've got a play on really research and development. Hence, why we believe the agrotech is critical. Now, to do so, our government has been for actually 2 decades proposing an amazing schemes. And all of you in the rooms which are thinking about building a business, writing codes, developing R&D, needs to know that if you come in France, France is a tax haven for anything related to software development and research and development. Up to $100 million of R&D, 30% of that will be essentially extracted from your tax base. It's absolutely critical because we know that today that has proven to be successful. That's why we got the ability, the unique ability to attract many research and development headquarters. The classic one from the Google, Facebook, Fujitsu in supply, but more and more, when you are basically trying to revolutionize and disrupt an industry, we believe that we're offering something new. Now, obviously, I'm giving you a sales speech about my country, but this is based on hard facts, and the trend that we're seeing lately is absolutely second to none. Now, that's very important also that you need to know that while we are very good on R&D, there is a new entrepreneurship culture. To illustrate my points, let me just tell you that just a few years back, when you were asking the questions to the 18 to 25 years old, what you want to do in the future, just 10 years ago, 13% of them would tell you, I want to essentially become entrepreneurs. The shift which happened over the last 5 years is amazing. Today, 60% of the 18 to 25% want to become entrepreneurs. And that's translated into an amazing change of minds. And we have in excess of 300 accelerators, incubators with the infamous Station F, which is illustrating in the heart of Paris, 1,000 startups being actually nurtured out there with the corporates participating to it. So that's something unique and illustrating this amazing change in France. We've got also in a matter of few days, on the 15, 16, 17, 18 of May, the Vivatech show in Paris, which is certainly positioning itself at par with the CES in US of the Hannover Messe in Hanover into the leading tech event in Europe. But most importantly, and being the venture capitalist I am, when you look at the amount of investment and the company which we're creating, you can see that we're creating a new generation of tech unicorns, which is unique. Last year in France, we created 12 unicorns. In just 1 quarter this year, we have been creating 9 unicorns. I know that you can debate whether or not that gives you a good sense of the dynamism of the tech scene, but it's worth what it's worth. And to complement my point, I would like just to focus now, to conclude, on the booming agrotech, agtech, and food tech sectors. Here again, what we have is unique. We've got a landscape which is rich of 500 startups. And the theme is really going from the fork to the fork, essentially going from the producer up to the house where the people can consume what has been producing. It's one of the most active sector, and if any of you have got an interest either for investing or for developing business or just partnering, joining, you should really come to see that firsthand. And using the forum here, we've got actually on the stand of Business France, Davide, we've got 16 French company which are presenting their strategy. Now, this is supported by old and very rich ecosystems made of cluster, like Aquimer, focus on the sea, and what our friends from Oceana has been mentioning early on is actually very much telling for us. As you know, like for Italy, France do have an amazing facade of sea, both with the Atlantic and the Mediterranean rivers, not talking of the Caribbean and other places. And we believe this is the core centers. We've got also the French tech, which is this logo of the little cock. You've got the accelerator incubators, the public funding, and the associations. So what we want to do in France is very clear. We want to basically rejuvenate our whole economy by pushing hard on the French tech. And within the French tech, we believe that the ag tech and the food tech is critical. Now, in order to do so, it's important you understand that a lot more resources are coming. If last year, $227 million have been deployed in venture, which was essentially 10 times what was deployed 4 to 5 years ago, just the first quarter, we have been deploying 136. One company is true, Insect has been taking 110 millions of venture money, but that just to give you the sense of dynamism, of momentum happening in France right now. And I believe that if you have an interest in that, you should really come. In a global base, if you look over the last 4 years and trying to position itself against our competitions, we have 341 companies which has been raising money in France over the last 4 to 5 years, more than in UK, 223, and clearly far ahead of any other country. That's actually led me believe that typically in Italy, the raise will be also massive because Italy, with the strength that it has, needs to have more than 67 companies calling for money and investors to basically disrupt the world tomorrow and address the challenges we talked about. Now, linked to this ability to call on capital, it's also critical that you are able to have the corporate world which is taking on board, right? And we have some example of the Sodexo, Carrefour, TripAdvisors, or Michelin, which has been providing an exit to some of the companies created in France. Now, better to talk to you about more figures and facts. Let me now just briefly go through 4 or 5 core companies which we are very proud, which have been very successful or about to be very successful. The first one is Insect. Insect is essentially producing natural premium ingredients from insect. It's used for the aquaculture, pet food, and more. This is a company which has been essentially raising in excess of $110 million of capital, building a new production centers to extract the protein from these core materials, and they are targeting up to $70 million. It looks to be a huge success, which is illustrating the dynamism of the French scene. Another one is Agricool, which grows organic fruits and vegetables in the middle of Paris, using 90% less water and only renewable energy. Here again, if you can judge by that, these guys have been raising up to 25 millions in a Series B range just back in December 18th. A third example is Yuka, very cool apps which I invite you all to download, which give you a transparent rating to all food products by tracing nutrients compositions. Huge, huge appeal, 10 million users. You can become one of them today. And again, these guys are now starting to monetize that and making a real difference in the ability for all of us to deal with the proper food. A fourth example would be Frishti, which is a classical delivery place where you deliver healthy and tasty ingredients. Now they're even diversifying in the delivery of fresh food, and they essentially have been raising an amazing amount of 45 million euros to date. And again, this is talking a lot about dollars, but if investors, financiers, are deciding to invest in this, it means something. Now, to close, I couldn't basically not mention La Ruche qui dit oui, which is essentially a way to bypass the supermarket and give access to the producers directly. They just are merging with Comptoir Local. They've got 270,000 active users. So you see, that's just to illustrate what's happening in France. We're very pleased to be present here at Seeds&Chips. And if any help you need, there is a Business France booth where we will be able, with Christophe Monnier, the head of Agrotech, to help you, because Business France is the agency in charge of helping the French company to export, the startup to export, but also to welcome any type of investment. This agency has got worldwide networks, and we really believe that we can make a huge difference on all of that, right? So that's essentially to conclude this little speech, but I could not finish it with a video. So to invite you very quickly to go to Rich some food for lunch, if that's what you decide to do. This is for business friends. This is some of our results. This is the magnificent record that we have. Over the last 2 years, we have been having a decade. Let me now show you this quick video. Thank you.
You may get the feeling that something's happening in France's tech scene. Something special, something big. You're right. And you know what? It could be even better with you here. Bonjour, we're La French Tech. Founders, startup employees, investors, and community builders. From Paris to Hong Kong. From AI to smart cities. We are rising fast. Ready to scale up with you. We believe growth goes with progress. Profit with purpose. And ultimately, we believe in a better tech for a better world. Feel like we're on the same page? Grab this opportunity to shape the world you want. You have never been more welcome. Join us.
Rejoignez la French Tech.
Il t'arrive la French Tech.
Join la French Tech.
Tiaju, la French Tech.
Venia para la French Tech.
Raggiungete la French Tech.
Join la French Tech.
Rejoignez la French Tech.